Sue, thank you so much for coming back. We were, I think I actually pulled up the LinkedIn message. It was 2 months ago which also seems like an eternity. And I won't lie, it was my email automation tool that pulled up your podcast interview from like a year ago. And I was like, oh, your interview from a year ago about vulnerability and self-doubt and all that. I'm like, pretty relevant right now. And so here you are, we're back on it. And I think we're going to literally use your new, like, it's not necessarily new, but your word. And I'll let you introduce it to the audience, but I'm excited for it.
Well, thank you for having me, Ryan. I don't care if it's automation or anything else, any conversation from you with you is welcomed. So I'm grateful it pulled it up. So thanks for having me. And the word itself is unfuckwithable, which we've trademarked. And I love the word. I've loved the word for a long time. And it really just references a very Zen state with a kind of attention getting word, which is why it's such a nice juxtaposition, if you will. You know, it means to be when you're truly at peace and in touch with yourself, where nothing anyone says or does bothers you and no negativity or drama can touch you. And that's what unfuckwithable means. And it's, to me, it's when leaders are at their finest, they're at their best. You know, that's where we are. And if you go back to the book that I wrote, Chasing Perfection, you know, it's the journey really from being in imposter syndrome and doubting and being in that, I won't even say it's vulnerable because it's not, it's self-doubting place where you start saying, oh, why me? And the unfuckwithable side of the spectrum, which is the opposite end, is why not me? Right. And
Right.
so that bookended experience is really what it's about to me.
Well, that's so what I love about this is, and why I said on that LinkedIn thread was, it's more relevant now more than ever. And you didn't make this up in the last 4 months. So it's not like COVID was this new branding marketing opportunity. Like this was going on before all of the shit hit the fan over the last 4 months. So I think it's
All of the shit.
yeah. It's funny. I was talking to someone recently, and we said, okay, so we essentially have the potential for the Great Depression that collapses or that collides with like the social unrest of the 60s, that clashes with all these different movements at once. So like have that, and then try and not talk about this stuff at your holiday party or dinner or your family or your coworkers or your employees. Like I was on this group call with 25 young entrepreneurs recently, and like it was workplace safety, systemic racism, mask, no mask, schools, COVID. I mean, it was just like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think when you talk, like maybe we can set a little bit of groundwork here for the listeners too, is like, you mentioned imposter syndrome and then self-doubt and vulnerability, which you and I talked about in the last episode, which we can put some links to, but like maybe explain kind of how you got here to quantify what this unfuckwithable word is and why it is there and how to get there. So it's not just armor that you were born with.
Yeah. Oh, God, I wish. I'm still reinventing that. No, I think we all visit both states, right? So it doesn't matter how much achievement you're recognized for or what your definition of success is. For me, the moments of doubt creep in. And boy, if they haven't crept in this year for everyone, I want whatever you're having. To your point, we have this, cacophony of things that all mix together to challenge the best of us on the best day. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, it is that continuum of, I went through many family members dying, 3 to be exact. My mom died, then my brother died, then my dad died within a short window of time, on top of going through a divorce, having my house look like it was going through foreclosure and pulling it out of the dregs there and seeing every material possession I owned in a pod. And it fit in one, just so we're perfectly clear, not the biggest one they have either. At 40 years of age, I was dealing with 6 of the 7 categories of grief at one time. And so people were like, and no one knew, because my veneer, my armor you talked about was the fake stuff, the pretense, the maintaining the image to the outside world that, hey, things are good. They're not that bad over here. I got it all together. And it couldn't have been further from the truth. And so that journey of going from this series of things, and both of my businesses were collapsing because it was 2008 and 9. So it was in the midst of our recession, which to your point, this year might, be surpassed by a lot. Let's say it that way, potentially.
Yeah,
we have
potentially.
the potential for that.
If we all have a crystal ball, right?
Yes, but that series of events had me really examine who I was, what things meant, what material possessions were. And, until you have that kind of undoing, at least for me, in a significant public way like it was, I don't know if I always knew how to dig deep. I'm an entrepreneur. I think we all have that. But I really think when you look up and you say, what's it all for? And you're 40 years old, you're a single parent. And the greatest credit I could say is I have my son and myself. We're going to be okay. That I will not let anything happen to. But I had my little car, which was not brand new, that really meant a lot to me because it was a symbol of freedom and independence and all kinds of things. And my 2 little dogs. And really everything else was pretty minuscule and non-meaningful. And I questioned my identity and worth in a significant way. And today I couldn't be further from that, but I still have moments of doubt that don't parallel anything like that in my life at this time.
Well, and then when we can talk about how you pulled yourself out of that and came up with this word, and then how people can strive to it. Because I think, it's one of those things where you're even your book, Chasing Perfection. You're never really there if you're
Nope.
truly a good leader. You and I talked a lot about Brene Brown, I think, and then, some of these other fundamentals that I think hold true now more than ever. And I think, maybe I can set some of the groundwork too from some of the conversations and podcast interviews I've had of, I've watched like the spectrum, like there's almost like 3 big buckets too that I've seen. You have the third of business owners that just got, catastrophe from their business. So you like sometimes like no revenue, like, okay, there's nothing anybody can do because of state mandates, whatever it might be. And then you've got the other,
right?
yeah, like there's like, what do you do? Right. So, and then there's the ones that totally kicked, like, you got the ones that were, they were helping people with remote working, or I have a friend that he had like this, well, he still does have help. They do remote fitness training for remote workers. Well, okay, you know how they're doing. And then you've got the middle chunk, which are just down 20, 30%. They're dealing with cash flow issues. You're just dealing with stuff. And so when I say lay the groundwork is, business owners tend to, we talked about in the last episode, tend to pretend everything's fine. So it's lonely at the top because you got either the imposter syndrome's telling you, hey, you shouldn't have made it, but you made it, so let's not talk to anybody else. And I guess now more than ever, Sue, like you just need help from everybody, right? And and so how to just deal with like just even the mental shit of you under, your help of like explaining how to deal with this and reach out for help because, the things that I want to help people avoid, Sue, is like the decisions they're making now could impact them so much in the future, from taking on debt, not realizing that, hey, I could go down to a pod in a car and still be fine, but pretending that the past is still there and it's not. You know what I'm getting at here? Where it just, you seen that, or like how what would you have for the people that are kind of at this breaking point of like just decisions that they got to make?
I think it's so hard right now, and I don't think anyone, myself included, has the answer. I think that's such a rich set of questions. It's complex. You're dealing with a pandemic. We don't have a playbook for that. We certainly don't have a unified plan nationally for that. We don't have, even in our communities, a way of processing what does this mean and what's happening. And you can see that by the various states every state is in. So when we say, what's the impact on business? I think the best answer you can ever hear is, it depends. Because are you doing local business? Are you doing national business? Are you doing international business, global business? If you're a tech firm, depending on if you're doing forecasting, for example, those companies are killing it because everyone needs to forecast, reforecast 500 times a day.
Hmm.
So I think it's how do you create a group of trusted advisors who can help you know and learn your business? And to your point, really get in and have that safe space to tell the truth. And they intimately know your business to support you, because it depends is such a lame answer, but it's so relevant today because there's too many variables in the mix. When you throw in racial equity, when you throw in where you live and how your local and global community is impacted, all of this stuff impacts everything. Are your kids at home all day? You and I were just talking about that. How does that impact it? Are the people you're communicating with amenable to that, or are they offended by that? Most are pretty relaxed these days because I think everyone's going, look, we're trying to get by. But the things that I know are perennial that can be minimized, but they're not, are this is a relational time in the world. This is where we have to be incredibly human. This is when we have to be vulnerable in the way you just talked about, where it's, I need to admit, I don't have this figured out and I'm scared, or I'm pretending like it's fine when it's really not. I mean, it's not. It's not an economy we've seen before. In an election year, throw that one in for fun at the
I
end of the
forgot that.
year.
Sorry. What do you think? What else did I forget? Right.
Yeah, what were you thinking? But I mean, we know no matter what election in history, Q4 and Q1 of the following year are paralyzed. It doesn't matter what way the election goes, it's just what happens. So I don't know how I answer that other than to say, like, core values are huge for your business. Who are you? What is the purpose of your business? To have you got crystal clear focus on what your highest and best use is, as well as, why you do what you do. If you know who you are, why you do what you do, and what you have superior skill to do, and you hone and refine and double down on that, I'm pretty sure you'll come out of the other side of this, because businesses are also made during times like these. Do you see the opportunities and seize them? Those are the things. It's more to me the questions you're asking than the answers you have, because no one has your answers. No one.
Yes. So you brought up a bunch of really good points, and I want to get in because I want to go back to the business side of, like, because I do
Yeah.
agree that you're going to be able to. There's going to be great opportunities for people in today's time. I really believe that. I think I want to go back to the mental state because of, like, maybe even having you repeat your definition of unfuckwithable, because, like, before, like, what I want to hear your thoughts or response to this is, like, because I know you and I know what you stand for, Sue. But, like, this is not like that word is not about flipping everybody the bird and saying I'm right, which there's a lot of going on right now, right? And, like, and I think about, like, this is not about being arrogant and, like, closing everybody off and saying I'm just going to do whatever I want. And today, more than ever, with all the stuff, like the amount of things that we can argue about between should schools go back or not? Should you wear a mask or not? Should you have racial diversity or not? Should you this word, that word, the other thing? All these different things that, like, trickle into your culture, your employees, your family, your like everything. How does your that word, does that make sense? Like, it's like about keeping things open and creating space, is but also being confident in yourself, right? I mean, like, how would you respond to someone so that way they don't just shut themselves off?
Right. So if you're someone who thinks the F word without saying fuck is profane, and that turns you away, you're probably not going to like the definition anymore. But the definition really is about when you're truly at peace and in touch with yourself, where nothing anyone says or does bothers you, and no negativity or drama can touch you. So that's what unfuckwithable is it's such a profound state of centeredness. You are exactly what you said, open, willing. I could sit with someone and talk with them, whether they politically agree with me or not, about politics. And I could have a meaningful dialogue and we would unite as a result. Doesn't mean we'd agree. It means we could come closer in understanding, we could have an intelligent conversation, and we might be able to more meaningfully understand the other person across the table and not dismiss, disrespect, or sever the relationship because we don't agree. Because if you look back prior, and I'm way older than you are, Ryan, but if you look back to
I'll
when
take
people
it.
didn't talk about sex, politics, or religion, right? Those were the three things you weren't ever supposed to talk about. That's how you were brought up when I was being brought up. And when you didn't know those things, man, there was some magic to that. Not that we want to walk around in denial, but somehow social media and posting our opinion and then hardening that into someone's character, which is what I see happening, is because I hold a strong opinion somewhere, somehow it condemns all the goodness or the badness, whatever way you judge it, of me. And it starts to be this thing like I'm flawed or I'm wrong or I'm bad because I hold a certain opinion with passion. And it didn't used to be like that because it wasn't always disclosed. I think there's something in between.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think like there was this oh my gosh, there was a book. It was like The Clash of the Financial Pundits, if I recall correctly. I read it about 10 years ago. And it was this guy, there was this statement in this book too, and it said, I have a certain set of opinions and beliefs. And as I grow and research, I will take new data and synthesize it against what I hold, and I will either accept them or deny them based on what I learn. And I was just like, that's so great. And like, you just start to realize like the people aren't doing that right now. And I think
Right.
in order to, you have to listen and you have to be able to have these discussions about like productive discussions to get to the better outcome. And you have to kind of take your unfuckwithable and say like, but you have to have that confidence to be open, I guess is my point.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to be defensive for some weird reason because you're not confident with yourself. So it's almost like this. Would paradox be the right word for it?
Um,
I'm trying to like
yeah, potentially. Yeah.
you think the word is like something where you're confident, so confident that you don't need anybody's help, but what you're doing is you're actually more open because of how confident you are.
Correct. And it's more, I would use the word confident is one layer of it. I think it's more grounded and centered because that kind of unwavering or unshakable kind of place you have just as often as I have, right? You visit this place and it's sort of like when you recognize you're there, it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like meditation. Once you realize you're meditating, you're gone, you're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that conviction of I'm okay and my opinions are just that, and I might learn or unlearn something by having such a meaningful dialogue like you do every day, Ryan, with the talks you have and the conversations you're inviting, just like this, where it's like, can I be present to what you just said about this book and let myself be undone in a way, knowing that nothing bad is going to happen. And it doesn't mean I'm giving up or losing. It means I'm opening myself to being influenced. It's a practice in coaching that when I was teaching coaches and certifying them, we would call it suspension, which means to hold an idea or an opportunity or an opinion or a judgment or a thought out for scrutiny, knowing you can pull it back in and it's going to be exactly the same because it's just an idea, a thought, a judgment, an opinion, a story. Or I can put it out there for influence. And should it make sense to me based on what I know, exactly what you said in that quote, I might change my mind. And that'd be okay too. Neither route is bad, wrong, scary, because I'm still intact because I'm feeling so certain in who I am, not what that means.
It's such an important trait for good leaders because like I think about, like, I think you and I talked about Brene Brown last time, and then also Ray Dalio is like my one of my favorite people on the planet, and like he's got this thing called believability, and talks about getting into the arena to rumble, right? And it's like,
Mhm. Yep.
what do you think the challenge is with these leaders? Like, even if as a business owner, like, why would people not let that happen? What do you think the biggest challenges of what, like, of allowing that to happen?
I think ego. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. And when I look back at that really rough time in my life, ego. I want the world to have a perception of me versus I'm solid with who I am. And if the world doesn't approve, probably those aren't the people I'm going to be hanging with. And again, it's not a cocky or a dismissive stance, it's a certainty and a solidness where it's like, I want you to believe my life has been a certain way, so I'm going to invest myself in what I think you need to know to keep believing that rather than here's where I am and here's the real deal. And I need to work through that. And there's some stuff about it that has some rough edges and I might need some sandpaper.
Hmm.
You might have the sandpaper.
So I think this is tied to this point is like, when you think about, like, especially as us as business owners, where there's the accumulation of things that are around you, whether it's employees or culture, buildings or possessions or whatever it is, that become ingrained or embedded in someone's identity of like, yo, you're the person that's just say yes and you're all over the place and you're EOS, and like those become labels to you, which you
Yep.
replace those things with any other business owner who is the, manufacturing widget or whatever it might be, right? Or CPA or attorney or whatever. Is like when you were back in that situation soon, you had just the pod in the car, and like you realized
Yep.
that there was no possessions. For someone that hasn't gone through that, what would you define as, in when you say centered or grounded? If you take away those things, what's left? And then if you haven't gone through what your situation is, advice would you have for people to figure out who they are, or and grounded and centered, if they haven't gone through that?
Yeah. I think great question. And without shamelessly promoting my book, there's a million
Go for it.
practices yeah, the practices in the book are what I tried to distill it down to is what are the activities and practices you could have so that you have more frequency of feeling unfuckwithable versus feeling imposter syndrome because you're still going to feel both. That's the thing. There's a continuum. It doesn't go away. So, when I looked at that, the thing that I can describe to you is intellectually, I don't know that I would have said anything dramatically different than I'd say today, except for that it wasn't more than an intellectual. Like I could have read it and I understood it, and I'm not my car and my stuff, and who cares if it's one pod? When you're really there, and I'm looking up saying, that's it. That's my whole life inside a pod. What the hell is it all for? It forced me to go beyond the idea of it and more going, who am I in the matter?
Hmm.
What am I capable of? What really matters? And it sounds trite and contrived to say things like relationships and my family and blah blah blah. But you know what? Strip it all away. The most profound part about that period in my life was absent of stuff, and I'm holding up air quotes if you
Hmm.
could see me, whether that was material things, the busyness I had become accustomed to by filling and overfilling my calendar, the communities of people I surrounded myself with. Ryan, I spent a ton of time alone during that period of time because I didn't have the cash. Couldn't go to happy hour. I couldn't go golfing all the time. I couldn't be at any events. And frankly, during the recession, there were less to be at. And not looking at stuff and not being, I'm going to use the word distracted,
Hmm.
really had me go inward, which was one of the richest gifts I ever had. But the most surprising part, because I was alone and not distracted, and I didn't have clients coming out of my ears and I wasn't busy, was I really sat down and I went, I found peace. and peace in a profound sense of that word. I, again, don't want to be dismissive or make it sound light. It was this calm, peaceful, amazing place, which is what I mean by that word, where I was like, this doesn't define anything of me. And this has nothing to do with what's possible. And it really, frankly, is a better state
Mm-hmm.
in such a profound way that I went, oh, that whole self care thing I've been neglecting, that has a new meaning to me. And it really was self care, not exercise and checking the list of the things people say to do. It's quiet time, whether that's meditation or really being thoughtful to get some space and some perspective on all that's happening. And too many leaders don't practice it enough. We just do to accomplish and solve and fix and help. But really, what we're depleting is our ability to, get a wide angle lens on the world. And that kind of pricelessness to me, I could never take back. And you can't manufacture that. And I don't wish bad circumstances on people, but I got that as an intellectual gymnastics experiment. I did the actions prior to this, they were my lifeline to moving through it.
I think there's a couple comments on different parts there, but like the intellectually versus knowing is
Mm-hmm.
huge, right? Like, because like you're right. I mean, like so many people can say the right things because enough people have been, spammed with ads and self development over the last decade to like
Amen.
know what they mean, like would know what it's supposed to be, but doesn't mean that they felt it. And when I can even say like when we had the last podcast, I mean, I would say I would probably be on more on the intellectual side of it, and like even though like it like workout routines and this and that, but there was a lot of just like go and so close to depletion. But we talked about the book Essentialism, and I actually like the pandemic right now and quarantines, whether depending on when this gets launched, we are either out of it or we're going to have another one. is So I think it might be like a roulette
Yeah.
depending on where it's at, but it gives people the ability to kind of have that experience that you had, but like what is like you drown out the noise and you say, okay, what is actually important? Because like no one and allowing the space to find the knowing, right? Or
Right.
to experience it. Because otherwise, if you're too busy, it's impossible. And I think that's what leads to a lot of the burnout too. I mean, I can't imagine like some of the people that are trying too hard to fake it right now, and like they're gonna wake up and just go, "This is enough" at some point, which is that's not that's not the goal.
No, and checking off self care things off of your list, your to do list, like I meditated, I journaled, I, worked out all today. And now I've got 75 meetings back to back on Zoom. And at the end of the day, I'm exhausted, isn't the answer.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
I would hope they can.
Yeah.
um, I do think there's, again, we have the answers, but whether we truly embody the opportunity of doing the work, which is, I think, in the systemic racism, the same thing. I think it's a great idea to educate ourselves as for the white listeners. I think that's spot on. So please don't hear me being dismissive because I'm not. I have a book study going. I'm working on it. But I literally woke up the other day and I'm like, a bunch of white people reading the book by a black male who's done great work and laid it out with no context other than we're all white trying to get our arms around the material in the book, puts another white lens. And I feel like the segregation of that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, because the only way it really gets reframed is when I'm talking to people of color and my friends and community about, tell me what this means to you and tell me how we get about unifying, whether it's black, white, purple, green, yellow, orange, whatever color we are, or our communities. Because to your point earlier, in our social world and in our physical world, they're mirror representations right now. We are adversarial. We are divided. We only seek to listen to the people we can tolerate, and we're zoomed out and we've got stress in every corner with the multiple facets of all that's happening. And yet I can tell you truthfully to the tips of my toes, because of what we were just saying and what I went through, I'm not afraid. I don't have fear about this. I don't have a concern I'm going to lose everything. I have a healthy dose of respect for keeping my mind and my body sharp, but I will not at any level feel like I could lose everything, because if I do, I've been there. It wasn't that bad.
Well, I think this topic of like listening and being open is so important, and it's so like fresh for me too, because like I think about even in I'm curious like as you're doing it too. So like I mean, I deal with business owners who have the chance of being extremely vocal, regardless of where they're at on the spectrum of any topic, and
Yep.
and like so like you and like I can go from one conversation where no one believes anything on one topic to the other conversation an hour later where they believe the exact opposite. So you kind of have to ebb and flow. And like, but this, the point of that is this, you have to be okay with yourself in order to listen. And so many people want to jump and argue right away that it's like
Mhm.
so frustrating. And there's a, I'll give an example of what I'm trying to say is like I have a friend. He's got his. They have a COO that posted something they didn't realize was not okay. It went on from Instagram. A COO of a pretty big company. Went from Instagram to then you got someone captured it. Went on to Yelp, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Holy crap!" Where they like slung into the middle of this whole thing, and like there was just no room for anybody to learn, right? So instead it was just
Mhm.
arguments instead of saying, okay, why was I wrong? So like, cause like I like they were gonna go ask for an apology, but I'm like, do they know why they're apologizing? Or can you just like have them apologize for not having the ability to learn? Right. And I think about like leaders need that to have their employees feel safe and to be able to talk about these things versus just like the amount of destruction that can have in our and the cultures of these companies can be huge if this is not if this problem's not solved.
Absolutely agree. And I think you encapsulated it beautifully as there's a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. And true listening takes a presence and again a groundedness where you don't have to give anything up. Similar to an apology, a sincere apology when you've done something wrong is one of the most healing, generous acts you can ever commit, because you're human and your humanity is available, and it actually opens the door for the best opportunity in the domain of emotional intelligence. Really truly the best time to create trust is in the absence of it. So if I say something that completely offends you and you have the courage and the bravery to say to me, "Hey Sue, not okay," when in that moment, that is one of those leadership moments, right? Where if I truly care about you, which is the missing ingredient, I can't look at you as a voice in a crowd or a face I don't know. So it gives me permission to be dismissive. It means I have to see you as the human you are, as valid as I am, and say, let me take that in for a second. Let it ruminate in my brain and let me sincerely be able to respond in an authentic way to you, not defend my position, because it really doesn't matter. My intention has nothing to do with the impact that just happened for you, because the impact is very clear based on your communication to me. Can I receive that in a steadfast way where I say, thank you? Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Can we talk? And then if the response is an apology, where I can sincerely say, Ryan, the way that I said that was wrong. I apologize. I sincerely didn't mean to hurt you, and I did. And I'd like the opportunity to do better the next time. Can I give it another shot? That isn't a big deal. But if you're not grounded, all I do is react and go, why are you doing that? You don't have a right to criticize me. I didn't mean it that way. Why, and it's all that BS. That's all we see.
So
It's
much
exhausting.
totally exhausting. And I think that I'm I think about how I try to be as mentally tough as I can be with all the right try to do it the right ways, but I'm exhausted lately. And I think that's why this word and the topic on this show right now is so freaking important for the leaders of businesses right now, because there's such a lack of leadership everywhere that all people want is someone to look up to and to trust and to believe and to be safe with. And so business owners have a bigger chance right now to make a difference on all these topics, whatever they might be, just by doing what you said. And it's harder as hell, but how they can come out of this, because your people's gonna be what gets you out of this. Period.
Correct.
So
Correct. Amen. Put
yeah,
that in stone.
right. And if you think about, if you did what you just did, if you're a business owner and you're doing that with, because people are looking up to you and they're either going to say, yep, you're just like all the other lack of leaders everywhere, or they're going to say, look, there's actually somewhere that I feel safe to go to and to bring my issues. I mean, the bonds that can be formed that can accelerate growth for the next decade could be totally different than they were going into this.
Preach, Ryan, preach. Do it. That's great. I mean, it's accurate. It's accurate, but it's exhausting. And I was going to say something. I was going to pile on to that, if I may.
Yeah, do it.
So I opened social media, which I do in very small doses and have since March. My team takes care of our social media stuff so that it's at least responsive and whatnot, and they make me aware. So I have to thank them, because I'm really not the genius that does that and propagates your podcast or anything else. But the reality is, I started reading, and I have a diverse network like you do. And sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes that's a pain. And on this particular day, it was a pain because it was so negative. No matter who I was seeing, the people who I happened to agree with in, majority of their thinking, or the people who are less like me and pose challenges, it was just hurtful, just stuff I wouldn't be proud to put out. And I was like, maybe I just need to take a break permanently, like take my
I've thought about
thing down, my profile. I couldn't get the word profile. Take my profile down and just take a break and just tell the world I'm taking a break. Like, this is too much. But two things happened. I went and was quiet afterward because I thought, I'm having a strong reaction to this. I'm at a breaking point. What haven't I done? What am I not doing to take care of myself? Because as a leader, what occurred to me is, you don't have that luxury to just go, I'm out. Because if I'm out, then whatever that is won. And that's not okay. I can take a break. And I wrote a whole blog on rest, don't quit. Sometimes you need to take a break and just say, I'm at my max. I can't put any more in like that. Today is not my day. But it doesn't mean that I won't wake up tomorrow renewed, refreshed, do the things I need to, or a week from now, or a minute and a half from now. But I'm going to do the things I need to so that that no longer has me. I have it. So that's the awareness to be able to say, this is the antithesis of Unfuckwithable, where I'm going, just quit. The other thing is, a friend of mine on social media, bless her heart, did something tremendously acknowledging and saying, because you write a blog every day and started that a year and a half ago, I'm taking the challenge on too, because I've been afraid to write. And I'm going to share my voice because I want to be a catalyst for change. And she credited me. And I remember reading that going, and if I would have quit, let's say I would have quit earlier, she wouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects change. And those two single events had me go, I need to be mindful of what I take in and what I put out, and how I be a catalyst for positive change, and also speaking my mind, because we can't quit, Ryan. You and I weren't born for that. That's not who we are. That's not what the world needs. And to your point earlier about the business leaders, they're not either. None of our CEOs, both of us work with CEOs and their leadership teams. You don't have that luxury. Pressure is the price you pay to sit at that table. So step up, Take a break when you need to, take a pause, but don't stop. It's a comma, not a period.
So then what are some of the things that you're doing to stay grounded and centered? And like how do you like if you as the business leaders that you're working with, maybe whether it's yourself or people that you're seeing successfully balance this and maybe and also give a couple good examples of hard situations where they practice some of these skills that they're learning.
Absolutely. EOS would call it a clarity break. I would tell you the same, and without borrowing that language from Gino, but I think it's the right thing, is devoting dedicated time more frequently than you ever have to clear space in your mind. For some leaders, I just got off of a call with several. All of them said at least 5 minutes, and some days it's an hour, where they don't do a thing, just sit in silence and witness what's running through your mind. If you need to or want to write, that's more of a clarity break, where whatever's in your brain, you get it out on paper and you let that happen. But you do so with a frequency that keeps your brain, at its optimal best, meaning there's space for stuff, because we're a consumer nation. We're always putting more in. I'll read another book. I'll learn one more thing. I'll join an anti-racist reading club, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's good. If there's no room in there, you're not going to do anything with it anyway. It's going to be one more task that you resent. You're not going to take it in. And so literally the people on the call that I do weekly, I'll give you a very tangible example. Someone called me this weekend and she said, we're reading the book, and the way that we're doing it, I have some friends who are in this group because there's 55 people in this group and I organized it. And she said, there's four of us and we really want more structure than what's being provided, because there's a workbook that goes along with the book and we want to follow that and we want to read and get into the nuances of the language of what things mean and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I am absolutely open and receptive to having you lead that discussion and you talk about it. And if the group itself wants to go down that path, I will embrace it wholeheartedly. And I want you to understand how learning works for me. Unlearning is way more important than learning. How are you applying what you're reading is way more important to me than whether I understand the terms used and if I could spout them off at a party or a Zoom event or with my neighbor. Yet I need to know them, because having facts and logic and grounded stuff to base it on helps people understand. So I don't, again, want to be dismissive of your route, but my route doesn't work that way. I'm an activist. I need to get out. So what I then did, and I invited her to this, is I said, I started conversations in the community with people not like me in groups I'm not in. And that for me had more transformational value, and ended up having a 3-hour conversation feeling like all things were possible and that we don't have a plan, we don't have an agenda, we don't have a structure, and that is just fine. The one thing we have in common, which you'll appreciate, Ryan, is we're all entrepreneurs. And we went from that lens, we are one. Now, how do we build from there and find out what there is to do? We don't have an answer to that, nor are we in a hurry. But that, for me, is the way I need to learn. The way she talked about it is the way she needs to learn. They aren't wrong. They're different routes to the same issue. And we all have a different role to play and different people we can catalyze and different things we'll do as a result. And all are needed. And we get too mired into here's what needs to do to affect change. And it's this 4-point plan. And I'm the first one to say structure frees creativity. But this is a time where we need to undo, which is not the same as writing a business plan for racism or writing a business plan for how your business is going to look at the end of the year, because there's too much uncertain. But what do you know? What can you ground yourself in? What are the things you can practice? And that's a lot of self-care stuff. So that clarity break time to truly make space and let go is way more important than what you're going to do and put in and how many people you can talk to, right?
And I think your example just there is so easily transferred to, because it's super easy to say, okay, well, how does that relate to someone's business? And I think about like just that situation too, where you could say, okay, well, what do we know? That just like you wrapped up with it's a lot of uncertainty, but like I think going back, I think a lot of people intellectually have chosen their core values, but have never been tested. They've never been stress tested because we've been in a 11-year bull market, right? So you go, okay, what
Yep.
do we know? And you have a lot of different employees with different brain types and skill sets and positions on the bus or spots on the bus. But I mean, are you seeing anybody that's going back and actually rebuilding their core values to something that they actually believe now? Because with all the topics we've talked about, you can actually really have a filter now on how you choose to handle all these things.
So I think that's a great perspective. I will tell you, my clients, I have not seen that. I've seen them double down on their core values. And in fact, I see them being more genuine and honest about adhering to them as a cultural standard. So, what I would tell you is what lends to some of the unemployment currently available is they're making the choices that I tell them they were too afraid to make before a pandemic came along.
Can you say that
But
again?
again, I do hard, yeah. So you can't be a weenie in a pandemic, right? You can't say, oh, but Sue's a really good worker and she's been with us since the beginning. You go, okay, are we keeping Sue or are we keeping Ryan?
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, Ryan's the performer. Ryan, has gone out of his way to help. Sue's frustrated, angry, agitated, doesn't, we're always having to, fix things around her. She's somebody who disrupts more than she helps. There's no space for that because we don't have the luxury to
Hmm.
keep people who don't align. So again, I do hardcore work with clients on this. So I would tell you when you've done a good job to the question you're asking, they get like magnified and powerful and even more so. If they're not doing that, yeah, you have work to do. But I haven't personally seen a lot of that because great core values were, are, and always will be who you are. They might get a little nuanced in how you say it.
Well, I think I think yes, I totally agree with you. And I think whether someone has to redo them or like they get magnified, kind of like you said when you went through your experience as with the pod, and when you recalibrated your life, is you intellectually knew them before. So even if your clients or the business owners have intellectually chosen the core values because they do believe them, now they're actually really having the chance to practice them because
Double down,
yeah,
baby.
the double, yeah, the doubling down. Well, I think you know it's kind of like I don't know if how would you what adjective you would use to describe it, but it's kind of freeing when you say, okay, well, here are the core values. Here's this situation. What's our core value? I was on this call with this business where they were asking like how to handle this because they're a community actually, and like the on the community they got into all these fights, and like it was just like, well, when they were trying to figure out how to handle them, like, well, what are your core values? And then it was just like, and like you can just say like, because they were trying to figure out whether they should let it continue, not let it continue going. I'm like, well, what are your core values? And then they're like, oh, well, then we can make a decision based on the core values and blame the core values, not take a side. So it was like the core value. Does that make sense? Or did I say that the right way? Like,
Right on. Really, really well said. Again, that's how we should be saying, does this fit the culture we say we stand for?
I like that. So, like, when what are we talked about getting freeing up your space to focus on yourself, and then having the hard conversations. Like, like for the spectrum of people, like where they're at, whether they're really struggling with imposter syndrome or they're getting to this point where they're centered, and like, what can you do to continue to get there? You know what I mean? Like, what actionable steps? I mean, is it the book? I mean, is there certain practices or like with the sheer amount of stuff going on, like what are you seeing that your members and your clients are doing?
Great question. I think we're all going back to the basics. I think relationship is first. People are finding grace and comfort in simple things like cooking, like eating a meal together. like falling in love with the family that are also your coworkers, right? The challenges that come with that, but the blessings of you'll never have that much time, possibly ever again in history together. That is, I'm going to say a little bit forced because of the pandemic, but also this opportunity that some of us who had latchkey kids and whatnot didn't do. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying the homeschooling part and all of it's buttoned up, but the other side is how how are these things really a pause in the way it always was so that we can reflect, and that's again a result of the space. We're never going back to the way that it was. And anyone that thinks we are is on some other planet. We're not always going to be where we are this moment either. And there's joy in that and there's challenge. So, how do we really have thoughtful lens to look at what really serves the business you're in, the way you want to work, the what works and what doesn't about life? Like me, I love to travel. For business, I don't love to travel. I have been, up till COVID, a road warrior. I've got my diamond status, right? And that being said, if I never go back to traveling like that, I will be grateful because I didn't realize how hard it was on me because I can do it. I have a ton of energy like you do. But the toll it took on me until I had gotten quite a bit of rest, because now I have no commute, was profound.
Isn't that
And
great?
until you get that perspective, right, you don't say, oh, yeah, I'm not traveling. Now, would I travel? Yeah, when it becomes safe and we've got this thing figured out, yes. Right now, today, not super anxious to get on a plane with any frequency. Just not. I have too many people I care about in my life that I wouldn't do that for, nor would I put myself at risk. So there are things like that that every person has to evaluate. If you don't travel like that, it's a non thing. You're going, oh, we lost our vacation. Oh, do we do motorhoming? Again, back to the basics. That's how I grew up, was we didn't have the opportunity or the luxury to get on a plane. So we did a motorhome trip 2 times. Those were our big vacations in my upbringing, my entire life. I did not get on a plane until I was 19 years old for the first time. That's just, to me, communing, all the basic stuff that's I'm going to say been forced again, not
Mhm.
really, but how we've come back has also opened our eyes and our ears and our hearts to different things. And can you scrutinize at home and work what that means going forward in a meaningful way that again offers many paths for your company, for your employees? Because I think it's one of the most amazing gifts when you can look at it and take a scalpel to what really, really looks based on your vision of how you have the greatest impact, which is what I think all business owners want to do, is how do I affect change? How do I help people? How do I solve problems? That's what we do. I always say to people, we help people and we solve problems. And the more we get effective with that in whatever the circumstances, we can take many routes. But if we get attached to the way that it is, we're stuck. We're dead in the water.
Well, and now more than ever, like you said, on with your example of the airlines, I mean, you can truly challenge the norm. And like I had a guy recently on the podcast. We were talking about flow. It's this guy, you'd really enjoy this guy, and it's like, well, you shouldn't build the business around you instead of having your life be built around the business. And I think there's a lot of people that talk like that, but like now is the time to say, like, how do you actually want to do that? Because like you're not forced to do this stuff anymore. And like it's amazing how much stuff over the years was like ingrained socially by social norms, even though no one really liked it. It's like the commuting, like
Right.
you said.
Right.
I mean, like, and I don't know if it's my generation or just my ability, or not my ability, my desire to always question stuff. But I like, since day one in the working world, I'm like, so wait, 4 million people get up and go get in a car and jam on the roads at the same time every day. Like that just makes no sense to me. And like, but then you're just like, how do you change that? Well, you have a global pandemic that changes it. But you have this
Helps a
ability.
lot.
What's that?
It helped a lot.
I know, and but it's like it's interesting that now you do have this ability to say, okay, what is the right approach? And like, and I don't know, it's interesting, Stu, that I think like so. Peter Drucker said that like in our day and age, especially with technology, is the first time ever that we've been in this world where all of our needs are met except mentally, where like we like the people that are successful have the ability to manage oneself. And like
Yeah.
we kind of have this ability now with this freedom to think of like, okay, how do you want to manage yourself? Because it's like, but what I've noticed is because like a lot of my, my career has been like in this world of abundance, and it's hard to turn it off. There was no one that taught us that growing up. Like, hey, by the way, here's how you teach. Here's how to turn all that shit off and how to filter through it. It's never been taught before.
Right. And as entrepreneurs, we gravitate toward more and learning and adding and making it complex and, all of that, where this might be a time where it's what can I unlearn? What can I let go of? What are the best parts of this? What are the best parts of what was? How do I envision that impacting the future? How do I allow for something new to emerge that may not be here yet, that allows us to grow amidst incredibly uncertain times? Because what's certain is, again, who we are, why we do, what we have superior skill to do as individuals and as organizations and companies. And if you can press into that, the rest of it is how. And how is fluid. But we aren't always good with that. To your point, you're entrenched and you're enculturated and you accept it as a norm. There's no norm. Get on the bus and have some fun with it. You can be irritated about that, but guess what? It doesn't care.
So you do a great job at helping people with the how and opening up room for unlearning and learning on your Intentional Greatness podcast and your blog. So what's the best way to get in touch with you, your practice, EOS, your speaking, the coaching, the podcast, all this stuff?
Oh, you're so great. Thank you. I'm on all the social channels. LinkedIn always works. Look what it did for us, Ryan.
We're
My
back
website.
together. Thank you, teams.
Exactly. And you will be on Intentional Greatness as well, because that's just the way this works. Reciprocity is part of
Love
the
it.
deal. And I'm grateful to know you. Sayyes.com with 2 Y's and 2 S's, like Sam, is another way to find it. And everything else, if you look up my name, you'll find me. I'm not hard to find. Ask Ryan. Find him.
Thank you, Stu, for coming on the show. I enjoyed it. And if people pick up the book, you've got a lot of good words of wisdom. And like I said, on the LinkedIn thread, it's more important now than ever.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thanks for the great work you do and for having me on again. I appreciate you a ton.